Hmm. Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Marten. I see Chance is taking his drops. What magic drops are you taking?
I'm about to do a bunch of potions, but this is Sacred Awareness
Okay.
from Lotus Way. It's kind of reflective, but yeah. Too
Nice.
many different flowers to name, but a lot of different orchids. And it's really great just for awakening the intuition and your perceptive capacity. It's even got silver hydrosol in it. I really like that. And now I'm going to take some inspired word tincture. You guys are seeing me using my secret weapons. I don't usually do it right at the beginning. I'm typically already loaded up. But Typical New Herbs is, I just got a package from them right before we came on the air.
Very nice.
Really excited about that. Kyle's the man and his lovely wife, Serena.
Yes. Yeah. I liked your, I didn't catch the whole entire thing, but I liked your stream with them on birth and conception and all of that kind of thing. It was really nice. Yeah. Yeah. And hello to Voice of Reason, who I think is Paul. I'm glad you're here. Jenny G is in the house and she's feeling, what does that make her feeling? Happy or excited with the top knot?
I think it's the hug emoji.
Thank you.
She's giving us a hug. Thank you, wife.
Nice. Thank you for translating. That's sweet. Nice to have you here supporting your chants. That's awesome. Great. So we will start to get into it. Rockfin is live. I'm going to share a link. We are live on, looks like Facebook worked and YouTube worked and X is working and Rumble and Vigilante TV. And we're so decentralized around here. It's amazing. Just like little streams in every direction. And also Chance is multi-streaming to the InnerVerse channel, or maybe two of them over there. So that's great. And if you're not familiar, now I'm kind of seeing you guys as co-hosts of InnerVerse now. Is that how you guys see it?
Well, Gabe's my right-hand man for the Wednesday night live stream that we do, which is called Vibrant. So it's confusing. I get it, but I have 4 different shows at this point. And right. Gabe is riding along with me most of the time on 2 of those 4. And, sometimes he pops into the regular InnerVerse appearances as well when we just got to unpack some major gravy. But I know that the audience loves Gabe. I love hanging out with him. He brings the highest caliber of witness to everything that he perceives. And the enthusiasm and fun is always there, along with the insights that you can't get anywhere else, period. So do my best to make sure that he's, hopefully not burning him out, but included as much as possible.
Nice. That's great. And so we're going to talk about Verbal Judo today, which was really fun because I hadn't really consulted you guys on what we were doing. And I went in a totally different direction, which is fine. It's great that you have an actual direction. I don't have to invent one. That's always good. And I know that I have some great bios from you guys. I'm going to have to pull them up. Apologize. It's been a wild couple of days. We started the Nurture Cure course yesterday that you helped me get the word out about, Chance. So thank you very much. It's really amazing, the quality of people who are showing up right now. It can be a huge spectrum of people, right, from the most down and out and people really beating themselves up in their role of helping others. But I always pray to God that they come to me a little bit more in the self, introspection and self, not analysis is a really bad word, analysis paralysis, but willingness to look in, willingness to feel, willingness to learn, very open. And they're just diving in and getting results. And it's so, so beautiful for me.
Well, I see a lot of clients for biofield tuning. And one thing that I notice every year is how there's groupings of a theme that seem to follow the zodiac sign that the sun is in. It's part of why I'm more of a tropical guy, because it fits the tropical position. But during Cancer season, which is the sign of like nurturing and mother for sure, I have a lot of clients that need some help ironing out their shadow aspects of the nurturer. So it's a great time to be launching that course. It's amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I'll just quickly say it's not too late if anybody feels the call to work on their boundaries and get clean. I often say that, get clean as a helper, so you're not coming from any hidden motives and you can just do your thing without injuring yourself in the process. Then you can go to my website, bethmartens.com, and click the link, The Nurture or Cure there. So without further ado, I am going to introduce Chance. Sorry, you can hear my brain is still working on today. And so Chance is the host of InnerVerse podcast, which I love. I turn to that podcast sometimes when I feel a little bit like I'm maybe not, I don't want to go to sleep, but I'm not really alert and aware, and I just want a little uplifting. And so your channel is fantastic for that. I never get bummed out from listening to your streams, Chance.
Well, that's the goal. It's more about the energy is more important than the information, although I prioritize both.
There you go. Yeah. And it's just always done in a spirit that's not about spreading the doom porn and the fear and making you all edgy and stuff like that. So more and more, I'm not listening to that stuff. So I'll just finish reading your bio here. So the InnerVerse is a podcast dedicated to prying open your third ear and showing you the reality of perpetual synchronicity. With 8 years of experience in podcasting, Chance has developed an effortless ability to maintain a positive vibe, as we talked about, in conversational flow states. His knowledge is a wide variety of subjects, allowing him to see connections that others miss. Chance is also a biofield tuner and seasoned energy worker and divination specialist, having helped hundreds of people around the world align their mind and body. His consistent efforts at researching language, symbolism, and mythology fills conversations with fresh insights. And I also got a fancy bio for Mr. Slick Dissident, who's Gabriel Peter, who sounds incredibly close to Peter Gabriel. I know you know that. Every time I did it, my brain wanted to flip it the other direction around. And so Gabriel Peters, darn, I got your name wrong? Crap. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, doing too many things the last few days. So he's a father of a kind rebel spirit. How nice, and I'm sorry for you. And although that's very good for their future, I must say I also have one of those who's grown up his rebel into being much more able to just get along when it counts. And he's a lifelong martial artist, a massage therapist, hence the judo today, by the way, and a philosophic frontiersman. His highly informed and low-tech adventurous bridge building blazes esoteric trails respectfully through cultural worldviews and dichotomies to inspire a higher standard of appreciating the many psychic mountaineers that pass through the tree lines before us and those yet to come. His self-initiated dives into astronomy and history and tarot systems have tapped deeply into the substratum of the synchro-mythical formulaic alchemy to unriddle only so much social engineering and extract appreciable correspondence of many programs on offer in the vast sea of Lex Mercatoria. His systems have harnessed the Enneagram's vices, virtues, and freedoms of association to fortify and renovate our vessels for heightened imaginative pragmatism. He also loves to dance. So that's very good. And welcome to people who've been coming in the chat. Hello, Richard Bonner. Nice to see you. One more quarter. And I think that's where
somewhere back in our archives, there's a Vibrant episode where Gabe does the splits on camera.
Oh, okay. Very good. All right. I'd like to see that. All right. So we're going to talk about verbal judo. And I just wanted to start with a few questions. Like, how did you, Chance, and Gabe meet? How did you connect?
Through the internets, right? I believe that we made our acquaintance when we were both frequenting a channel called Weaving Spiders. And from there, that show has a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? Which is the fun of it. And so the direction that an episode might go in the flow state of it could vary based on who sort of takes the steering wheel more or less. And Gabe and I think, just naturally gravitated towards each other because we tended to steer things in a similar direction. And we had probably similar love foundation for what we do rather than boogeyman examinations. Not saying anybody over Weaving Spiders was, but we just had the same spirit of enthusiastic inquiry into the mysteries of symbolism and reality, and how the dream interpretation model of comprehending the events of your own life and of the public stage is the most useful and efficacious one for understanding your own self.
Very nice. Good answer. And anything to add to that, Gabe?
Yes, I remember that fateful night very well. I think it was my first time on Weaving Spiders, and I do believe it was episode 47, very synchromistic number, the number for silver. And yeah, Chance and I, we bonded immediately. I could tell we did a tattoo share. I saw his lightning bolts, and I saw his spider, and I showed him my tattoo. Yeah, and I could tell that our destinies were bound. And so, yeah, it has been a wonderful journey to be a friend of this fantastic healer next to me. It has been really wonderful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so how did you guys come to the subject of verbal judo? What was it that inspired you in the first place to learn that and study that? Go ahead, Gabe.
So, one of my past careers was a bullet man training, a padded assailant training, and instructing people in dealing with multiple levels of conflict and confrontation in their lives. And essentially, we were eh, um, some of my teachers in that network were Bill Kipp and Peyton Quinn. And anybody who's an old schooler or is familiar with Black Belt Magazine, those names will pop up on your radar. They're still up and running, I believe, in Colorado. And as a martial artist, my lifelong dream was to become a padded assailant bullet man trainer. And lo and behold, I my destiny found the way, and I inherited one of the padded assailant body armor suits from my father-in-law, essentially, um, uh, in a roundabout way. And so I learned how to train people and how to deal with multiple levels of escalation in conflict, how to avoid that escalation process as best they can. And verbal judo is completely required reading for instilling that redirection of energy and preserving the self so things don't have to go to the next level. And something that we actually spend more time in the verbal phase in the training seminars. We spend actually 2.5 days making sure that we have the step-by-step process down before we go to the mats and actually get dirty. So that is where I started just about a month ago. I decided to dust it off again and to go back because I don't think I actually finished the book the first time. So and also I didn't have the internet or the access to go deeper with the research. So I went online and I actually watched Dr. George the Rhino Thompson do his in-person seminars from when he was much younger. And these were the seminars directly onto the police officers. And it was a large veil was removed from my eyes because I only knew him as an author, and he was a hero for me, guiding light. And when I saw him animated as a man, and I learned that his nickname was the Rhino, a great amount of context came uh, into needed understanding. And I came to realize that I believe that his work was actually uh, placed into pop culture in quite a few places. One in particular that is really um, uh, enlightening. It's enlightening. I have a belief that a lot of the fictional characters in film and cinema are actually they are enshrining the spirit of historical personas. And I've seen this pattern many times, but Dr. George the Rhino Thompson, I believe, was inseminated into one of the nemesis characters of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And so when I watched his seminar, he's actually instructing the police on how to circumvent people's rights and how to do it safely and in a controlled setting. And just realizing that somebody took his work and put it into pop culture for the children in a way that I see is a little bit nefarious. I think uh, uh, yeah, there's something that just not doesn't sit right with me, that I'm not pleased at what I found, and I think that it's important that maybe we, dismantle the alchemy of what was done with his, personage, as it was used, as a put into a nemesis character, Bebop and Rocksteady from the Ninja Turtles. I believe that, Rocksteady is actually the spirit of George the Rhino Thompson. Uh, and yeah, so that is kind of what opened this opportunity for us to kind of dismantle how culture is infused with actual people with long history and vast tethers of influence in many places. So that's kind of what uh, turned us on to look deeper and also incorporate what is good for our own use and separate some of that shadow that I think was cast onto the man himself, not by his will. I don't think that we should blame him for what was done to his body corpus after he was gone. Or no, he was still alive, but I don't think he was aware of it. I don't think we can really point at him in regards to what was done in the art of the Ninja Turtles. Yeah, and he also maps out on the Enneagram personality matrix very solidly. He becomes almost a key archetype example that we can use and bring up and learn from. So yeah, he's a number 8, a controller with a shadow of domineering, sometimes said a shadow of lust. And that 8 personality type has a nice remedial virtue. The church would tell you the remedial virtue is chastity, but I prefer the remedial virtue of sympathy. And
Hmm.
I am learning a great amount of sympathy through this process of analyzing his life and his influence.
Gabe, I haven't heard you mention the placement of him on the 8 spectrum or the revision of the remedial virtue for the 8 on the Enneagram being sympathy, but that's fascinating. Did you come to that because I wonder the part of the teaching from this guy, George the Rhino Thompson, is about avoiding sympathy, staying strictly in empathy. So not actually feeling their feelings, just knowing their feelings as a part of the redirect process. But I got to mention a few things about him too. I think to some degree, either he was culpable with the way that this body of work was used for nefarious purposes, or his own using of it because, like, for the goals of manufacturing consent, generating compliance, into self-incrimination, things like that. To me, it seems like he was involved with something shady that involved his speech work because the guy got cancer of the vocal cords. And as a battlefield tuner, I can't ignore the symptoms as symbols aspect of that, which it's very powerful. He's passed now. You know, I don't want to just villainize a person whose work has also probably served to de-escalate many dangerous conflicts and disarm people who are under the influence of, as he puts it, drugs or rage or despair or anxiety or etc. Right? All that is still the case. And we can take what works and leave the rest, especially on the manipulation side. There's definitely, as Gabe is alluding to, some social engineering context to this verbal judo strategy. When we look at the state itself and its points of contact and communication with the collective, it's verbal judo all day long. And another thing we need to point out about Gabe's discovery of this, or rediscovery of this important work, which inspired me to be interested in it, is that the weeks ago that Gabe dove in and found these old videos of Doc Thompson that are from probably the early 90s, someone had ripped from VHS to digital, that he starts talking about it. He starts researching it. He shares it with me. I am immediately tipped off in the clip that I watch by the fact that Thompson is telling people that you use the name to control, that the name is your strongest spell of black magic. I'm paraphrasing, but he does say the exact words black magic. And I'm like, okay, we've got a winner. We need to look at this more deeply. So I put it on my back burner. I scheduled a conversation with Gabe that we just had last night, finally, with the intent that I'm going to explore this video series where he's training police cadets, in the days or week before we're actually going to talk about it. So it's fresh on my mind. Well, we come around to the week that we're supposed to do this show, and Gabe had just recently gone on a larger podcast, one-on-one podcast. It's got a pretty big reach, and talked about his verbal judo stuff. And then these videos have been scrubbed from the internet now. Not a single vestige of them remain. They're as old as YouTube itself, ancient videos in the back corners where not a lot of people ever cared to find it. It was irrelevant, didn't matter. So why in the world, even if the Verbal Judo Institute had some sort of copyright claim on the likeness and teachings of their founder, why in the world would it be just in the moment when Gabe is bringing it up to our circles and looking at it more deeply, that then it goes poof, up in smoke, unable to be found? I searched every possible way, high and low, in all the alternative places, and it's just gone. So I had to approach learning about this stuff from the public-facing teaching that's available and from the book itself. So not nearly as overtly nefarious as some of the training police officers get about getting people to comply or submit their will. But just looking at it through the principles of verbal judo in the simplest 101 sense, we can still glean a lot about ways that we can effectively communicate, ways that we can avoid manipulative communication ourselves. A lot of this stuff is intuitive. It's put into step-by-steps, but we don't need the step-by-steps. We just should understand the principles. We can talk about some of those principles that I find most useful, or we can go more into the social engineering element of verbal judo. I'll let you take it from here in terms of what direction to go, because there's a lot of potential in this subject.
Yeah, so I would love to start with the social engineering side of that. It's always interesting to me. I like that you're talking about how they're attempting to manufacture consent, also using the name to control. And are you referring there to, if I just say like, Chance, what was your experience with verbal judo? Is that what you mean by using your name, or is that different?
I mean, the birth certificated person,
Okay.
the corporate identity,
Okay.
the all caps name.
Okay. Yeah, we might have to.
Where you are, in a performance of contract, whenever you identify with that name and
Right.
all of the ramifications that follow that.
I do see it pretty different now. It's true that birth certificate binds us, but as indentured slaves, not contracts, right? Because we didn't have any agreement. It doesn't
Right.
fit the agreement, or doesn't fit the definition of a contract in any way. And
Yeah, I could agree with you there for sure. And even the use of the personhood isn't always negative. It's a tool, right? And that's why we empower ourselves with understanding the system. But in terms of self-incrimination, that's a big step towards the control of those without knowledge, is to get them to identify as the person rather than understanding that this is, this card I'm holding up is government property. I am not this, right? So that's, I guess, what I meant by that control.
Right. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I just reminded of, every so often, say as a coach and I'm working with somebody, I will use their name, and it is for the purpose of, can be a little bit of a coming to, like just seeing through something, having a little bit less of, sort of emotional barrier between me and their words. And anyway, so I was off on a totally different track with that, but using people's name as the birth certificate is a different meaning. So yeah, let's dive in with how the verbal judo may have been used for social engineering, and then how we can use it for freedom.
So Gabe, I want you to mostly take this one, but I want to just put two key points onto the table that encapsulate the whole verbal judo system and how we can think about that in context to the state. So the main principle of this type of deflection, redirection, mental martial art is say what you want, but do as I say. That's a key principle. And ponder about that in the context of your First Amendment rights. Say what you want, but do what I say. And then, the other aspect of this is that the verbal judo trains people to do the opposite of what they feel or what they want. And that's very much in line with the layers of false persona that people take on, and that begins with identification with a name that's not themselves. So, Gabe, take it from there.
Right on. Thank you. Yes. So one aspect of his career path that he laid out in his in the seminars that I was able to watch is that he specialized. He graduated from Princeton, and he specialized in disseminating the Ars Notoria grimoire, which is a magical text on how to learn magic rapidly. And some of the peripheral works around the grimoire are also involve mastering of rhetoricians and speaking to persuade people with your words. And when he said that, he actually was extracting some knowledge from that during his seminar. And I found that interesting in the beginning that he has experience with magic, but then he comes right out and says it explicitly. He uses a great metaphor. He says, if you want to control your enemy, then you must use the black magic of their name. For example, if your child has a teddy bear, that they have given a name to the teddy bear, and if you throw that teddy bear out the window on a family trip, then you just threw out a member of the family. And that little parable that he told was so revealing to me on so many levels. For one, because we know about the placenta, and I see that attachment to the teddy bear, that comfort of the familiarity, as also correspondent to the placenta, which receives that paralleled name. And I just found it so profound that he overtly says to the cops he's training that this is black magic. And in his resume, he is has mastered the Ars Notoria. So I found that highly against him in a way. Um, but the thing that was another level of insight here is realizing that his personage was turned into a toy for children to attach to and associate with. And so it's almost like his metaphor goes in reverse, because he becomes the toy and flies into the window and lands on the child's lap. And I just found it so penetratingly insightful to dismantle that one little nugget out of his entire teaching process. I think that was in the very his first video. That's why I knew I was hot on the trail of something very important. So yeah, I just wanted to share that was one of the most important aspects. And I did get a screen cap of him saying that. I actually have that on record, that he uses the term black magic and he talks about the teddy bear.
Oops, maybe we lost.
Yeah, I mean, if they're scrubbing things off the internet that Gabe watches and talks about, maybe he's getting zapped. I don't know. I don't like to be paranoid like that, but
Yeah,
we're always dancing around Gabe's connection issues and praying for the day where those are fully resolved.
that's okay. It'll give me time to just clarify. So, what's the context of this training? Is it when people are, like you said, it's making them do the opposite of what they want? Is it when they want to, riot and enact violence and be out of control, or what's?
No, that's a good idea to clarify that. So
Mhm.
when I say training people to do the opposite of what they want or feel, I'm actually talking about the police officer or the corpo student training to go work in a high level position, things like that. So of course, they're being trained to do the same thing to whoever it is that they're trying to make the sale with, or trying to get to comply with whatever police policy is necessary,
Okay,
or to
got it.
de-escalate a conflict. But to specify what he means when he says training people to do the opposite of what they want and feel, he says something like, in terms of speech and language, that natural language is disastrous. And this is another big tell. Like, when you are hip to things like neuro-linguistic programming and other ways of implanting subliminal information or all of that jazz, and you watch this guy doing his teaching, it's clear that he's operating on levels above than what the people receiving the information in the seminar are necessarily aware of. He's got special ticks for getting information to go in the way that he wants it. A sniff move that he does that Gabe sussed out. But natural language is a really interesting thing in a legal speak, because you can consider natural language to just be the way that you and I talk to each other, the way that words and meanings shift among a population over time. And in the context of the verbal judo training, natural language are the words that just bubble up and rise to the surface within you effortlessly, without thought. They're related to your emotion. And he's telling people, never use natural language. You're performing. You're always performing. So that comes back to that contract aspect, legally speaking. And legalese itself is a great example of a dead language versus natural language, or like Popish Latin, where there are copyrighted specific meanings to words that are not mutable. They're not open to interpretation or subjective. And that's one of the below the surface things that you pick up on when you watch his trainings. But he's in the context of natural language, he makes the metaphor of karate versus judo, where verbal karate is where you lash out or snap at somebody, where your words are used as blows, where there's essentially, I would boil it down to the type of language where you have intent in your words to make the other person feel bad.
And that's all karate, you said?
That's karate.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is an aspect of it that I actually, I'm fine with or align with in terms of a personal philosophy about communication. Is when you do verbal karate, it escalates stuff. It brings your credibility or your authority into question. It is easily recognizable because it's reactive and there's no forethought to it. It can burn bridges. It can alienate others. Your words are, even if you apologize for your words, somebody's going to remember harsh words that you said to them years later, even after like a physical injury might have healed. And those type of things don't really ever go away. So, but performing verbal judo, it's about, in the context, I want to differentiate. I'm going to talk about this in the context of what can be good and useful in this moment. So if you're doing verbal judo, you feel emotion from an insult that somebody's hurled at you. You consider the insult to be a spear thrown at your head. Do you let it hit you in the face and then you're hurt by it and you're reeling and you don't really have your faculties about you, or you just get out of the way and let the spear fly past you and hit the wall? And that's the whole principle of judo, is to give way to an attack and then redirect using the energy of the attack back at the person. And so how they do that, or how you can do that in communication, is somebody throws an insult at you and you disarm their insult by accepting it. And he actually calls this strip phrases, which is where this giving way to the attack, where you say something like, I understand that, or I appreciate that, or, you're probably right about that. And then you say, but, and then you follow it up with what you need them, what words would actually serve your purpose. So in the context of, interacting with an officer, you might call them a pig or a stooge or whatever. And they'd be like, I understand that, I appreciate that, but I still need to see some ID. and everything after the but is designed to get the job done.
Mhm.
You know, and it's
Sorry.
even more powerful if you follow that with question. It's this concept in terms of energy dynamics. I call it accepting is protecting, because people lose a lot of juice, especially in relational dynamics, by being averse or trying to hold up some sort of boundary against the negative emotions or energies of people around them. So they think that person, my wife, my child, my friend, they're having a lot of depression energy right now. They're very angry right now, and that's toxic. I can't have that. That's bad for me. So I've got to change them. I got to find a way to fix it. Or I got to put up a hard boundary. I got to shut them out. All these different things. And when we have this like rejection of the other's energy, that's actually what causes the most influence on us. It's changing our behavior in a way. We're taking it in, taking it on. When we accept that it's there, we say to ourselves, it is what it is. It's okay that they feel that way. I am not affected by that. It's the same as letting the insult fly past you. So I'm going to let Gabe talk now that he's back, but
I could also jump in here just because it's relating a lot to the work that I do in helping people deprogram. And first of all, the always performing, I'm wondering if there's some relationship to persona there, although I might be going off in my own tangent. But yeah, I just want to reflect that that's exactly, if you approach any internal conflict, that you could treat like an outer enemy who's hurling the insults at you, to that policeman, for example, and then you try to block it and you try to resist it and you say no to it, then it actually fuels the attack. It fuels the resistance. It gives energy to it. But so if
exactly.
yeah, so if that enemy that program you're perceiving it as an enemy is saying, you're gonna die, and you say yes, rather than, "No, I'm so scared, I'm trying to prevent that and run away and everything." "Oh, yes. Oh, and no one's gonna love me." "Oh, yes." "Okay, good." "You can't be in control." "Oh, yes." Right? And "You're gonna be in pain for the rest of your life." "Yes." "Good." Right? And then you can see how it naturally discharges, that it's as if the program goes, "Oh, I'm tired, I'm gonna have a nap," or something like that, which is just personifying and making a cartoon out of it, but it can feel exactly like that.
And one of
So
the
yeah.
key tenets of verbal judo is that empathy absorbs tension. So whatever
Nice.
ways you can bring empathy, which is being aware of how the other person feels or what it's like to be in their shoes. You don't have to take on their feelings. You just need to know what it is. And a big verbal judo tactic for this is paraphrasing. And it's important. So they throw spear of insult at you, or they come at you and they're like, I'm so upset at you because you never take out the trash and you never show me that you care when you come home from work. And they're upset. So they're going to probably make some absolute statements that are not really true. And your first instinct might be to say, how dare you? How dare you say, I never? I took out the trash 2 weeks ago, or I brought you flowers 2 days ago. I showed that I care. So if you refute their accusation, even if it's not true, they're going to escalate. They're going to go jump from a 7 to a 9 now on the anger scale. But if they come at you with that and you say, and this is part of verbal judo too, is there's these, like, they call it the sword of insertion statements, like, whoa, let me make sure I heard you right. So that's immediately that identifies that you're showing empathy. Let me make sure I heard you right. And then you just rephrase what they said to you. Let me make sure I heard you right. You're upset because I never take out the trash and I never show you that I care about you. And you've just shown empathy. All you did was just repackage what they said to you. Most likely, the person is going to then go down a few notches and say, well, that's not that you never take out the trash. It's not that you never show me that you care, but this time and this time you didn't. And so now, not only have you brought them down a few levels and got them to backtrack on their accusation and moved them closer to agreeing with you instead of refuting and making them more upset, you've also got more information. Now you know the specific things that they have umbrage with. And so you've absorbed tension and you've learned something. But it's important when you do this paraphrasing, you could call it a technique. It's intuitive. I knew this before I ever read Verbal Judo, right? It's just part of making sure they feel heard. But you don't say what you think they should have said or what you want them to have meant. You say exactly what they said to you as close to it as possible. You don't add any spin to it or interpretation to it. Just prove that you're listening. And that's a big step to diffusing tension.
Yeah, I'll jump in here too. And that's in my world, that's actually not a paraphrase because people feel like they have to somehow rework people's words and you can't just reflect back to them. But that's a coaching technique to say back to them exactly what they said. Half the time, people don't hear what they say. And then hearing those words back, it's like, oh, that's what I said. Like you said, there can be that instant kind of clarification. Oh, it's not never. I didn't mean never. And then when my son was young and he was in his little tantrum years, maybe 2 and 3 years old, and I got a little bit of advice from a book in a library. Unfortunately, never remembered the book, just took the advice and run. And it was exactly this, that when he was screaming, because there's no reasoning, he doesn't get the words, and any words that he has are, the faculty is gone in this state of tantrum. And so instead of pushing against him and trying to control him, trying to change his mood and behavior and action, everything, I would say things like, Liam is so angry. And then I would say it again, Liam is so angry. And then he'd get a little stunned. You see him kind of adjust and, Liam is so angry. And then the whole thing would just go. And it's exactly, does it come down to connection? Because he perceived that I was hearing him. I'm not trying to, get him away or push his behavior away. And I'm right there getting him.
That's another foundational principle of judo, whether verbal or otherwise. You have to stay in contact. Stay in contact.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, some wisdom here. And Gabe, did you want to chime in there?
Yes. How was my audio?
It's really good.
Oh, that's great. Wonderful. So about the person, something that really led me in.
Darn, it was good.
Oh.
It was really good.
Yeah, I've got some crackle, buddy.
Yes.
I'm going to try. Give me a minute. I'll come back.
Okay, sounds good. No worries.
We need to just, audience funding. Get me a plane ticket out to where Gabe lives, and I'll spend a day doing IT magic for him.
That would be amazing.
I'd love to do that. We can get him sorted out.
And then you come by Canada after and you help me with that.
But let's talk about the stay in contact principle, because in the verbal sense, it's about using self-referential language and proving empathy and the right facial expressions and all that. Now, I think there's a very thin line here between being authentic and being manipulative. So I talk about these as techniques or tactics. It's better and more wholesome if you just really have empathy and you're not doing it just to like get them out of your face or out of your hair, right? So I think you can do both. I think you can understand this is going to go the best way for everybody. This is how I create the win-win in this communication, is through this type of, you could call it strategy. But at the end of the day, it's not, your intent isn't about controlling them. It's about bringing everybody back into a state of harmony and coherence. And in particular, especially if somebody is upset at you, even if they're throwing accusations at you that are not real or that are overblown, the noble path would be look for where there is a kernel of truth. And that's where you're rephrasing, paraphrasing back to them, getting them to more clearly state their grievance. And then you look at yourself and you go, is there something here that would be healthy for me to change? Like, is this and always coming at it from that angle, I think is energetically the safe and harmonious bet. But in the social engineering sense, to go back to that side of it all,
yeah, it can have two sides, that one. And I think it's exactly what you're saying, the difference between manipulation and true connection. because you can be, maybe that's all I need to say about it.
Well,
Yeah.
a good way to sum it all up is the sage and the psychopath are identical in knowledge and skills, but opposite, diametrically opposed in intent.
In their motive. Exactly. Motive is everything. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
the sage has all the tools of the psychopath, and the psychopath has all the tools of the sage. It's remarkably accurate when you ponder that one. But staying in contact, right? This is
Very
the principle
well said.
this is the principle of mass media and political campaigns. They're always staying in contact with you. And another thing to keep in mind in terms of the manipulative aspect is I've already talked about questions being more powerful than statements, especially in the diffusing of things. There's different kinds of questions in terms of how questions are going to play out in an interaction that has tension. The fact-finding type of questions, the who, what, when, where, why, those don't feel so good when the person's already in a agitated state. So you want to be minimal with those potentially, maybe at least until you've moved things towards a safer or a more cohesive level, harmonious level. General or open-ended questions are better. Those are usually fine. They can tell you exactly what they think about a thing. But if you more specifically opt for an opinion-seeking type of question, like, well, what do you think that we could do about this? Or what do you think I should do about this? Those are the most helpful to diffusing because you're asking for an avenue for empathy. But in a social engineering sense, these are the type of questions that generate the most compliance. So put that in context of all the political campaigns and the opinion polling and voting itself. Voting is an opinion question, and it generates the compliance of the agreement implicit in voting that, well, even if the person who in my opinion would be best doesn't win, I'm still putting them in charge in my personal hierarchy. Direct questions and leading questions, those are also more direct questions would be like yes or no questions. Leading questions would be where you basically package the answer that you think they should say into the question itself. Those are also not very helpful. So in terms of asking as king, don't ask for negative answers. And gravitate towards general, open-ended, or opinion-seeking questions in your interaction. And another strategy would be, if you have a lot of questions, to before you start machine gunning them at them, just say something like, I've got about 3 or 4 questions about what you're on about. Like, is it okay if I ask you these questions? That way, because if you're going to go through a sequence of questions and they're not ready for it, then they are more likely to get defensive. But if you say up front, it's this many, and then we're good, they're probably going to comply with that. This is all the same tactics that the good cop, bad cop in the interrogation room are going to use too, just for the record. But you can use this for good as well. I'm going to kick it to you.
Yeah, so I so many parallels in coaching. As you know, I train coaches, and it's all question based. Because if you go in, especially where the unconscious is the subject, and you go in trying to tell them stuff about their own experience, first of all, it's completely false. You cannot know. You're guessing, you're projecting, you're maintaining actually separateness from them. And I love that like preparing them, because the surprised mind can easily say no and go into resistance. But yeah, if you say, I have 3 or 4 questions, is it okay? In the process of onboarding a client, I'll always say, I'm going to ask you these questions. I'll say what the questions are, and then I'll say, and if it looks like a good fit between us, I'll recommend something of my work that you might be able to use to get past the place that you're stuck. And you right in advance are allowing them to feel in control of the situation, because they can either agree or disagree. Like the 4 questions, like, no, can't ask me for questions. It's like, okay, we might not get along that well if you don't. But that prepared mind when you go into it's the same when you give a talk and you say, okay, I'm going to talk about this, and then you talk about that, and then after you say, and we talked about this, people get it way better than just giving them the points, so to speak. So yeah, it's getting their agreement in the process that they're there and they're on board. So I agree with that. Hello, Thunder Chicken. Nice to see
Hey, what's up, Lee? Good to see you.
you. I don't even know his name. That's great.
Lee Thunder
Great to know.
Chicken.
There
Unless
you go.
I'm wrong about that.
Private message. And then Gabe, how are you doing? Are you able to chime in here at all, or should we just keep going? I was curious if I could ask one question about something
I
he
can
said
try.
before.
Am I coming through right now?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Okay.
All right.
Something that occurred to me in the research was I had the impression that when an officer puts on a uniform, that the uniform is the mask of a policing persona. But as I watched his seminar, I realized that they're actually putting something else on. This body armor that they're given is not is an excuse not to take their job personally. And so I'm realizing that my formula was flawed, and there's another category removed from what we call your person and your personality. And so I just think that that's an interesting thing to think of and maybe correct uh, your what we think we understand about a person is it's enough to understand as a real life human being, but to become a cop is to take it into another level of fiction, a very dangerous and aggressive level of mechanistic thinking and sticking to the script and not saying anything off of this already established narrative. And so it is a deeper level of fiction than the way we talk about the persona in the sovereignty mentality. And I don't know what that category is, but it is something uh, just different than we think of the mask. It's more militant and way less heart centered. It is heartless. It is completely heartless by design. And so I just think that was interesting for me to learn that these career paths are actually something other than just a mask.
I will comment on that the training really, at least on the officer's level, really emphasizes the question of who are you representing. So when they are about to go into the field or into the crisis situation or just out to make speeding tickets or whatever it is their agenda for the day would be, and they say to themselves, it's showtime. And that's their trigger phrase to put themselves on the side and put on the layers of persona. And I say layers because it's not the same persona as doing business in the name of, or the ways that the all caps name can be applied as a liability shield. It's the representing the police force that they're part of, representing their whoever the chief or the department head is, representing the corporation that is the city, representing the state, representing the federal government, representing the Constitution, representing the entire idea of the police at large. So they are many layers deep in representation. I think that's my only way to understand what it is Gabe's talking about. That's the strategy for, putting your feelings aside, not bringing your feelings to work. And that can be really useful whenever you're dealing with a person under the influence and they're hurling threats or insults at you. And it can be used for good, but it also means that before you even start down the path of potentially violating someone's rights in a way that your inner voice or your conscience would not agree with, you're already so many layers removed from your feelings or your intuition or your conscience coming into the equation that it's that much easier to do the violation and maybe not even be aware of what a violation you're doing. So the very same strategy that makes it helpful in actual dangerous situations is the strategy that makes it possible to really infringe on people's natural rights.
Yeah, so I want to echo that again. And so when you're talking about the armor at the level of the personality and those layers you're talking about, very poignant. And it's the persona, and now I'm not talking birth certificate kind of thing. That's a whole like sort of legal financial entity, but the persona, the mask that we wear is a function of pride on the scale of emotion. So it's actually really high energy. The phrase that Lester Levinson would use is that pride is a hide. So everybody knows that person is in pride except that person, because it's got that hidden factor and they feel good and they're in their authority. Now, the primary function of the persona in pride is to separate, to assert, you're over there, I'm over here. We're not the same. We're not in the same camp. I'm either above you, or it can also be the reverse version of below you. But yeah, that assertion. And then that's exactly, and it reminds me of doctors and physicians, how they're trained as well, that in order to do the harm, right? Like whether it's just scaring people or cutting them up or poisoning them or all of those kind of things, like forgiving any doctor that has much more clean operation. But yeah, that what can they do that's heartless, that you couldn't otherwise do? And I know they are literally trained not to feel, not to empathize, not to, that's why you don't treat family members, because you actually have feelings about them. So yeah, I think this is definitely a by design.
And with verbal judo, just to make the distinction, they are trained to empathize, but not to sympathize. So they don't feel the feelings of the other, but they use their awareness of the feelings of the other to generate compliance. And that comes along the lines of creating. So let me give an example, because the ethics of this are kind of situational and intentional, right? There's a story that is shared in the book that may or may not be true. Remembering that George Thompson was a Princeton PhD in English, teaching things like, Shakespeare and Milton, he's going to be no stranger to fiction. But he does use this example in the book of a hostage situation where a man was holding his own son at knife point, threatening to end his life over the fact that the boy was possessed of a devil, to really consolidate the story, to shorten the story. And it was the mother's fault, according to this deranged man. And Thompson comes at the guy with the all the appeals of like, well, if you harm him, then your ex-wife is going to win. And, why would you do that? And it just kept making the guy more angry. The more that George tried to solve his own problem, his problem being that there's this crazy man here who he needs to stop, the more upset that the guy got. So in this example, the key to diffusing the situation, again, being empathy, diffusing tension, was to instead come at it from, what's this guy's problem? I need to approach this as if I'm solving his problem. So this is where you set your feelings aside and you go, and this can work in interpersonal relationships if the intention is noble. If you put your problem aside, which is the problem of they're accusing me of something that's not true, or they want something out of me that I can't give, and instead you just put it, instead of trying to solve your problem, you try to solve their problem. Now, in the spirit of truth, you would have to be intending to actually honor that appeal to their problem, right? But in the example of this hostage situation, George tells the guy, well, I know a priest who can just exorcise the spirit out of the boy. We can have him down here in 30 minutes, and then you don't have to harm your son. And that worked, even though the guy was obviously crazy and there was no real recourse to solving his problem, and that it was a lie. There was no priest or any of that, but it did get him to put down the weapon, and it got the guy arrested like needed to happen.
Wow.
Right?
Powerful example. Oh my goodness.
What a little
razor's edge to walk on for that.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
And this is, if that's a true story or not, it could be true. You know, you could imagine something like that happening, and you never know. Everybody's life sometimes takes weird twists and turns where you might need to diffuse a delicate situation like that, and to realize that you're never going to succeed by trying to solve it from what you see the problem is, but instead trying to solve it from what the problem person sees the problem to be.
Nice.
That will get you farther faster. And that's key. It's key. But on the ethics side of this, the way George teaches it is the greed principle, that everybody acts in their own self-interest, and that when someone's self-interest is clearly stated and offered, they will always accept. And that's part of the give and take of negotiation. You give what they think they want, but it's wrapped in what you actually want. And for good or ill, that's how negotiation tactics work. And be aware of that when you're in negotiations, that things can be potentially a Trojan horse, right? You might, like, the simplest way to put it is a con artist will use words to raise your expectations and then use those expectations to cheat you. That's the social engineering side of this too, that whether it's the science trademark or the socialist side of government or religious mythologies or Ponzi schemes, there's the promise of utopia. There's the promise of a heavenly afterlife. There's the easy get rich plan, whatever it is. Your expectations get raised by the con artist, and then you do what they want you to do because you have now got the expectation that includes your desire wrapped in it, and then they disappear, or whatever, they don't follow through because they're con artists. And that's the simplest thing. I just want to rephrase this so everyone can have it in their mental martial arts to recognize it when they see it. The con man uses words to raise your expectations and then uses those expectations to cheat you. So be aware of when somebody is seemingly playing on your desire or upping the ante on your expectations of what you're going to get or what's possible beyond what seems reasonable. I know a guy who got cheated by a crypto scammer just this way, and ended up losing all of his savings. His house was divorced out of it, where they just kept saying, hey, if you give me a little more money, it's going to be a 10-fold return. If you give me the rest of your money, it's going to be 100-fold return. Kept upping the expectation. And, it's gambling is also predicated on this principle as well. So now I want to add one more thing to this ethics of con artistry versus the healthy application of these language skills, is that this is something I've done in the past. I'm even kind of okay when it's done to me, but you can use your words to raise someone's expectations in a conniving way by prefacing criticism with a compliment, especially if it's just a general compliment. It works really well on men. If the wife comes at the husband like, I don't like how you did this, or you should have done this. The guy might be like a dog, like, I'm not a good boy. And then they kind of shut down and they don't comply or they don't cooperate. So the wife comes at them with, you are so good. I love you so much. Also, could you do the dishes differently next time you do the dishes? And that will tend to work. But and if it's in a spirit of good intent, I don't necessarily think that that's like con artistry, right? But people will use that type of technique in a manipulative way in life. So be aware of that, especially if it's a general compliment. Now, on the inverse, you can soften criticism that you have for someone by following it with praise. Especially make sure it's authentic and it's very specific, and it's not just like padding on it to get them to do what you want. I think it's a good balance to praise with constructive criticism, sure. But just be aware of that it can be a manipulative tactic. You might even use it manipulatively without intending to be manipulative. But in the end, it will, if used incorrectly or too often, it's going to basically make your praise appear disingenuous wherever it appears, and they'll be on guard for like, okay, what's the catch? Okay, what's the catch? So I wanted to add that in.
Nice, Chance. Did you want to add to that, Gabriel? If you can unmute and he can hear us, I could say some things too, but let's give him a chance since he's here.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to unpack a great amount of things quickly just in case I get zapped. So, when we were preparing for this and from our show last night, I had a realization about how appropriate the metaphor of judo is for the police. Because one of the secrets to judo is actually in the fabric of the gi. The uniform that judo students wear is not your other martial arts. It has to be very, very heavy fabric. It's completely unique to other martial arts. But this is telling us that it requires a handle. To manhandle somebody, you need their handle to have to be prepared to take a beating. And
They
much
call a
like you
name
were
a
saying
handle.
earlier about the person, your persona, and your name is your handle, but also your persona, your personality should have resilience. And if you have good character, then you have the resilience to take a slam and get back up and ask for more. And so I think that is an important aspect of using judo as the metaphor here is that they need a handle. Um, and then I want to just share some demystifying that I did this morning in preparation. It's going to seem like I'm in la la land, but I think this is a core root to what Dr. Rhino was doing. They were recycling a formula that goes back to Kent State. The Kent State massacre happened on May the 4th, and six students were shot by the National Guard, and that event is a torch. It's a trauma torch. And I actually have dismantled quite a few ciphers within the story itself, and I just want to share it here. So, the reason that Kent State is important is because the government realized that the local police were not getting the job done because they know the kids. They know the people that they're enforcing upon. It's too personal. They have too much sympathy. And so they had to go to a more removed source of enforcement to bring in the National Guard instead because they don't know, they have no vested interest in the well-being of the children. So they had to take it to another level of removal where the sympathy was not there any longer. And everything I'm saying is on the number 8 controller in the Enneagram. I'm going to pull it off. So may the force be with you is a trauma torch going back to Kent State. May the fourth be with you. This is R2D2 and C3PO. These two cards are R2D2 and C3PO. This is the hill that the soldiers were on when they shot those students in Kent State. This is the abdomen of C3PO. The number of bullets fired at Kent State was 67 bullets. 67 is the 19th prime number. And 19 is the 8th prime number. All of these numerical encodes are pointing at the controller. And so George Lucas was immortalizing, may the 4th be with you. And so every time we've said that, there is the shadow of the Kent State massacre. But also, furthermore, it was also proliferated in the comic books with Clark Kent. Clark Kent, bullets bounce off of him. And so these strange calls for retribution are inseminated into our culture that pass on to the next generation just to make sure. So I just wanted to put some of those ciphers in context because Kent State was a key turning point. And it was also the year before we got knocked off the gold standard. And this election is going to be 53 years since 1971 when we came off the gold standard. Guess what? 53 is the 16th prime number. 16 is the tower card. So yeah, the ciphers just keep on coming out of Slick Dissident here, but I thought I would share some of them because it's very fascinating how I love "May the Force be with you," but now that I know there's a trauma root, I'm more cautious with my words.
Right. Well, that's how people take advantage of our tender nature, that we are easy to traumatize, and that happens right from birth in our world. So it's in a way it's kind of boring how they just always capitalize on either traumatizing us or the existing traumas that we have and playing into it. What do you think, Chance? Looks like you want to say something.
Well, I would say we could maybe start to layer in the internal aspect of verbal judo. And this is something I don't think I've fully fleshed out, but that maybe you could be helpful with, Beth, because I know that you have a great comprehension of our internal self and the parts of it and the inner outer world reflection. I will bring up one slide.
Sure.
That's okay.
And thank you.
So here it goes. What I wanted to bring up is the left brain and the right brain that I'm sure we've heard about, right? That the left brain is the analytical side, the right brain is the imaginative side. Left is more orderly, right is more emotional. So logic versus emotion, linear thinking versus intuition, numbers and words and letters versus music and art and flow and feeling. And I will say that this left brain, right brain idea of that, we're a species at war within ourselves. I don't subscribe to that. I see the human body as the image of the cosmos, and the brain is the circuitry that reflects the duality inherent in our external physical world. And it's all good. It's all fine. But this schism is reflective of how we can be at war with ourself, or better understood as, and more commonly, as the left brain seeking to dominate and control the right brain. The thing about master-slave dynamics, the thing about being manipulative or controlling, is that it can be sneaky. You might not even necessarily comprehend how you're doing it. The person that goes to, I'll use the example of the person that goes to a 9-to-5 that they really hate, that they don't feel spiritually aligned with, that they feel like they have to do to survive, and that they don't really have any other choice. They may look at their life and consider themselves to be virtuous. Oh, I'm the poor, victimized empath that's always doing stuff for others that I don't want to do, or whatever the story might be. And the world is doing it to me. The world's making me be this way. And I never impose my will upon anybody else. I never manipulate or subject anybody to immoral force to get my way. And they may think that about themselves. And maybe externally that could even be true, that there's no overt attempt to enslave others. But the very fact of forcing themselves into a dynamic and a hamster wheel life that they do not resonate with, that they do not enjoy, that they feel enslaved to themselves, is the inner aspect of the master-slave principle, that everyone that is a master over somebody else, that master themselves is a slave to something above it. And it goes on in an endless loop. There is no end to that. So whether it's the middle manager who has a CEO above them, or a CEO maybe is Satan above them, or who knows what, right? It's a metaphor. But to realize that what is creating the experience of feeling forced to do things that you don't want to do is the fact that you are forcing yourself to do the things you don't want to do. It is really that simple. It's really that simple. So even if you can look at your life and paint the story of how virtuous you are and how unfair it is, I'm such a good person, why do I have this life that I don't like? It's because you're making yourself live a life that you don't like. And so that very enforcement upon your own inner self, that internal conflict is reflecting in the external world with masters that you perceive as enslaving you or forcing you to do stuff that you don't want to do. I hope that all makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I see it every single day. It's like we don't need controllers. We're taking ourselves down and out. And they'll capitalize on that inner conflict that we have, whether it's between the masculine and feminine. The master slave might be, an archetype that contains that masculine, feminine. But for the most part, when people go into conflict with themselves, then they don't even have the wherewithal to notice that anybody else is in the picture or anything. It's just your inner war. You're consumed by it. You are hypnotized by the level of tension, the level of energy. And what people are trying to get away from is exactly that, the tension and that polarity, trying to get away from the polarity, go into denial about the polarity, get the polarity away, when all the power is in that exact polarity.
Yeah, freedom is an inside job.
It's an inside job, exactly. So yeah, if you keep running away from yourself, then you keep making yourself vulnerable to those masters that are wanting to power over you. Yeah, it's all, and that's why they always say everything is by consent, or most everything is by consent, and how you can start to unravel some of those things when they say you have to, and you go like, I'm not going to, and they're like, okay, even though they said that you had to.
So like, in the way out of that is, if you feel really stuck in a type of situation that I described, and even though my words might resonate, you're still like, well, how do I get out of that? I mean, now that the cycle is there, how do I break this cycle? Because I have these obligations. I have this reality that I'm in, and I spent years putting myself into this cage, and now I can't just pull the plug. There's dependencies at play, I'm the master of things that will fall apart without me continuing to spin this hamster wheel. And to that, I would say it's baby steps. And those baby steps might even seem inconsequential, but they will take you somewhere. Generally speaking, being in that I feel like a slave to my job or to my life situation is a left brain imbalance, typically. Now, it's actually both sides of the brain that are having imbalance. The right brain is the side of you that feels like the slave. The left brain is the one that's enforcing it upon yourself, you could say, even if this is all metaphor or if it's really true biologically. So the right brain is not going to be able to force circumstances where it can express what it wants. All right. The left brain is currently the one that's driving, most likely, if you're in this type of life that I described. So create bubbles of experience for yourself where the right brain gets to come out and find out what it wants and start to explore and play. How my personal life, how I started taking steps to get off of the hamster wheel. And for some people, they can get out of it quick. For other people, it's a journey of years where they're making steps in that direction until they're finally there. It's either way, it's your path. But how I did it is with consistent daily practice of creativity. It doesn't have to, most importantly, is that it's not about a value judgment upon what you're doing. It's the thing for its own sake. So whether it's just spending a half hour making drawings or doing doodles or learning a skill on how to do something creative, writing poetry, whatever the case may be, you start etching out a space in your life for that side of yourself that's been repressed to live and begin to grow and thrive. It will start to have more agency in your day to day. You will be closer to a left-right balance internally. And those things that started off as just hobbies or just doing it for the sake of it will lead you towards or themselves become the avenues through which you find your freedom and your escape from your perceived enslavement. Right? Does that all make sense?
Yeah, exactly. For me to get out of my perceived state of enslavement in the corporate world, I made myself really sick. Right? You did it better, Chance. Right? You saw that element of creativity being the the where the real power is when you turn around, because that's the thing. And now
I
it's
did
not
it instinctually, and I didn't know that that's what I was doing for myself. I just went out and bought some big pieces of paper and a bunch of different colors of Sharpies and started making kindergarten style drawings. And then years later, I developed a bunch of different creative skills and put them into practice to develop a podcast. Then that became my main creative outlet, but just kept creating and enlarging the bubble of where you can express your creativity, which is directly related to the polarity of your fulfillment.
nice. Nice. And one way or the other, it seems like in this realm, we're going to have trouble. We're going to have challenges. Sorry, I'll hand it over to you, Gabe. And this was one of the things that happened to me after I had a border incident. Didn't go that well. We were pretty lucky in how it turned out, but I still ended up with a flagged passport. And it was after that that I recommitted. It wasn't my first time doing this, but I recommitted to using creativity as my tool of evolution and growth and releasing, as opposed to waiting for the shit to hit the fan in my life or problems to erupt, and they inevitably do. So I just did the 180 and full on, and I did create a lot of trouble for myself. I really did, but the quality of it is completely different, and it has moved me forward. It's been a very, very serious evolution to a kind of next level for me, not any, necessarily big deal for anyone, but just that I'm aware of it. And it's a high road. So go ahead, Gabe. What were you going to share?
So recently, I started studying Alfred North Whitehead, and I find him incredibly enlightening. Um, and one of the things he postulates, something he's quoted to have said, is that routine is the god of a society. And that is such a profound statement. And the word routine kind of has a stigma to it. A lot of us are like, routine, I'm good. But in the context of what we're saying here about finding a daily practice and rooting into the center, I think that the routine is actually very productive when you harness it for your own purposes. And I want to point out that the word kung fu translates to practice. And so many of us are kung fu artists and we just didn't know it. So, yeah, whatever your routine is that brings you back to the root is your kung fu. I wanted to share that.
Very nice. I love that. That's great. And yeah, so people who don't like routine, some people really love and adore and are attached to routine as well. And if you try to get them off their routine, they get shaky and can't cope and stuff like that. But we're probably in really good company here with the rebels who genuinely, I don't like every day to be the same. I don't want every day to be the same, even if it's like a kind of complication of some kind or an annoyance or like an outright interruption. I welcome it because it shakes up the energy. It's like moving your furniture to get a different perspective, or traveling just to get out of your normal ways of being that you get into a rut with and can be really unconscious. So yeah, that's really fun playing with that. And there's times for it too, and that can be a good tempering for a rebel to have some of that, so that they can, in fact, practice and hone their skills at whatever level. So yeah, really good points. Where would you guys like to take it from here if we have another, say, 15 or 20 minutes on the stream?
I want to hear some more from Gabe now that we've got a good connection there, brother.
For sure. No pressure, Gabe, you're on.
Right on.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, a few of the topics that Dr. Rhino Thompson revealed in the seminars that I got to see before they got scrubbed, that are not necessarily incriminating, but they are enlightening for us. And that is that he reveals that the very first sentence that a police officer says to you is breaking in. And those are, and we already knew this, but it's just very reinforcing to hear it from the horse's mouth himself. And so, as soon as an officer is talking to you, this is enemy engagement, and and then he also elaborates that in his first paragraph, he has eroded away the first four amendments, taken away all the options of reflecting back on your rights. In the next sentence, by the first time you get to speak to him, he's already at the door of your Fifth Amendment, and he's in the whatever comes out of your mouth next. If it's not pleading the Fifth, then you are in the snap. You're in the trap. And so everybody should just remember that you don't have a lot of time to think. And the first words that you might want to resort to for the sake of safety and efficiency is, are you giving me legal advice? Is this legal advice? Or you could just say, I want my lawyer. You're not, and I were talking about Neo in the Matrix. He stops the bullets using the N word. And N is the 15th letter that sums up to the 5. And so the N word of no, it's a philosopher's favorite word. Uh, and so, yes, the Fifth Amendment should be your first priority, because it's very likely whatever they were talking about before took away your first, second, and third, and fourth. So that's very important. And another aspect is, he kept using the phrase, I think we should use this as well, forced voluntary compliance. He was putting the word forced in front of voluntary compliance, which is an oxymoron. We know that. But I just find it quite fascinating how it went from the micro with each individual officer being trained to force your voluntary compliance, and then it went to the macro with the lockdowns recently. So this level of manipulation has expanded out and is quite it's a science to them, and it's just helpful for us to keep it in the forefront of our thoughts in the psychic self-defense. Um, and the other thing he was saying, this was really funny. He would tell his officers, you need a mantra to turn off your personality and go into basically kill mode. And the mantra that he wanted to have on every police station and in every cop car, he wanted them to have the phrase, showtime, baby, showtime.
That's gross. Ugh.
But also something that we could make fun of. So, yeah, something we could make fun of.
Yeah, that phrase forced voluntary compliance. What a mind fuck right there. Be like, oh boy, how do I respond? Oh my goodness. Yeah. So much effort has been put into manipulating people, and there are times for it, right? In the you couldn't uh, or you have to empathize with a police officer that's in some kind of very precarious situation, and various people stand to be harmed more than they might have been without your intervention. And so I think there are, like, back to what Chance you were saying about the ethics of the thing, and that I think there are places to use this in the extreme. How would you apply it to, say, our experience in the truth movement, if we could call it that? I know it's a hard one to define, but where do you see this kind of action? There's maybe some obvious examples where people are protesting, or you're part of a protest and you get confronted by police, and then you might be a little bit more hip to their tricks, kind of thing. But are there places in normal life that you see this applied, or what do you guys think how this
I'll,
could
I'll
be?
comment on the truth movement
Sure,
question.
please do.
That one element of verbal judo is generating self-incrimination. It's basically like an entrapment ploy. And there's plenty of, quote, truther channels where they encouraged people to go to places that were obvious honeypots, like January 6th, for example.
Right.
It comes back to the say what you want, but do what I say principle. And that's pretty much what protest encapsulates itself. Yeah, sure. You can riot in the streets or complain all you want online and in the avenues that we provide for you to say whatever you want. Yeah, exercise your First Amendment right. The First Amendment right is nothing compared to the Fifth. It's much more powerful, as Gabe was saying. Even on a numerological level, the 5 represents breaking away from the established order, pursuing personal freedom, and all that, which I appreciate a lot. So I guess the way that energy is, judo is about using other people's energy and redirecting it, right? Using it against themselves. And I see a lot of what passes for a truth movement doing exactly that. Whether it's the Q operation or, it has a lot to, it's mostly used against the right, but it's used against both sides of the spectrum, I should say. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that that's pretty clear, right? How you get people corralled into self-incriminating situations by making it look like that they're going to get what they want. It's the classic con strategy. You raise their expectations and then they don't get what they actually wanted, but you get what you wanted, which is they're on a list or they're arrested or what have you. So I see a lot of that in the so-called truth movement. I actually don't really like to identify myself with, or my channel with the truth movement or conspiracy culture anymore.
Sure.
I think it's become really, I hate to use the word toxic, but not helpful, because it's really just like alternative opinions and repeating of other people's opinions endlessly without anybody actually chasing down and doing the work themselves, especially in religious questions or symbolism questions or what have you. Cosmology questions.
Goes on
yeah.
and on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very tiresome at this point. I don't really appreciate just the appearance. People are so excited to latch on to something that they like better or they identify with more, especially if it becomes the excuse and ground for their victimhood or something they can point to and say, that's the reason why I have to be a slave, whether they literally say that to themselves or they're metaphorically asserting that to themselves. And that's the most popular opinion that is shared amongst conspiracy culture, is the prison planet. Reality is an illusion. The God is the demiurge. The archons are siphoning your prana out of you and manufacturing the circumstances for you to have negative energy outbursts, and on it goes. So I think that's become really attractive for, I hate to say it, but it's just more attractive now than any other version of victim consciousness out there, and is offered and put on display for people to gravitate towards, because it becomes such a, because it's a philosophical reason rather than a political reason. It's a lot, it's more religious. It's less, people are more inclined to feel like it's not debatable, right? Like it's a belief system. It's the ground of their whole worldview. And every worldview or philosophy requires a ground that you choose. You choose the ground you're standing on. Not, it can't be proven, whether it's the Big Bang or in the beginning God created or some other version of a cosmology. There's always a ground that you choose. And part of verbal judo that we haven't touched on yet, that is a really important part of it, that can be like any other tool, can be used for good or evil, is you intentionally create the ground for the opponent or the other to step out onto. That is a key component. So if it's an interpersonal dynamic, you create the ground for them to step onto with the empathy, diffusing tension, with the paraphrasing, repeating back to them, even if they made an extreme statement that it isn't true. you repeat that back to them so they can hear themselves. And you've now created ground where they can step onto that ground and say, well, you don't always do that, but I do feel this way. So that's part of control, redirecting their energy. But in this so-called truth movement, there's a lot of ground that's been created for people to step out on that says either just wait, there's somebody behind the scenes with a white hat on and they're going to fix it for you, or just wait, it's the noticing, and all the people with tiny hats, they're going to get theirs and then everything will be fixed because it's all their fault. Or the ground of doesn't matter how hard you try, so don't worry about it because the reality is a prison anyway. So just sit tight and nobly suffer until you liberate your divine spark from the matrix or whatever. But that's what that's what the nature of controlled opposition is, creating ground for somebody to step out onto, and then they get trapped there, or they trap themselves there, I should say, because it's always choice. Always comes down to choice.
Nice. And it comes back to the same element of creativity, that if you don't brave making your own ground, someone will make it for you. And they might have motives that are not clean. If I'm
Create
understanding
your
you
own
correctly.
ground. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, we're vulnerable in a lot of ways. And I just notice it is a little bit sad how people really gravitate towards the conflicts in this world. And it's if you're offering something of real value that people can grow and change on, compared to somebody that's like they're fighting and name calling, and that you said this and we said that, and it goes on for 8-10 hours, and there's such a big audience for that still. And I think
And
it's
remember, in
Mhm.
terms of generating compliance, asking people their opinion is one of the best ways to generate a compliance, through pulling out their opinion, especially if you seed their opinion beforehand. That is even more effective. So a lot of that is the disclosures of various conspiracies were probably to implant certain opinions that could then be pulled on later to bring somebody along by the rope onto the ground that was pre-made for them, like January 6th. I think Gabe wants to jump in. We should definitely give him a shot.
Yeah. We're coming down to a little bit of the end, so let's make sure Gabe has a chance to speak his piece.
Thank you. I took right on, right on. I totally hear you, Chance. I feel you, buddy. It's so funny when your fringe culture becomes mainstream and you're like, I'm on to the next thing. I'm jumping the boat. The word conspiracy theorist has some wonderfully granular revelations in it. I joke around that the phrase conspiracy theorist is a self lobotomy field kit, so that you don't have to think anymore or sympathize. Um, but it has conspy is speak on, conspy is speak on, and then racy, and then the word theo actually means planet, wanderer, or racer. Race.
Theo is also
So
God, is it
conspire,
not?
racy, theo, race,
As far as I know,
raced.
Theos is God in
It
Greek.
has the word race in it 3 times, which is a racer because they are the planets. They're racing around the tracks. So speak on, racy, race is actually what we're saying every time we say conspiracy theorist. And that is the biggest conspiracy there is that the people on the grand stage are presuming to be planetary deities. And now that I know this formula, I'm stepping out of the race. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to
So
translate
yeah,
Gabriel.
I totally agree. It has been saturated.
Can I translate
Yeah.
you for the layman, Gabe? Because I consider myself an expert translator of you. what he's showing in the word conspiracy theorist and the nature of conspiracy theory, which is that, hey, things are connected on levels that we don't necessarily generally notice or agree upon. You know, at its root, conspiracy theory is about drawing connections. It's the meme of Charlie at the whiteboard with all the red thread between photos of stuff, right? And I think this is a whole nother subject matter, but Beth will understand what I'm coming from when I say, when Gabe's talking about the racers or the theos, the planetary influences moving around a track, he's pointing at the same way he points out with his Enneagram or other categorization work that he does, that the core of our reality is defined by archetypal principles that live within us and express outside of us. And conspiracy theory pulls on that innate connection that we're going to see between our inner expression of archetypes, those archetypes as they appear in our personal world, and the way they appear to us on the big stage of the public collective awareness. And when we get lost into the victim side of conspiracy theory, we actually cut the cord of those threads that are telling us, hey, this is all an inside thing. You're looking at your own inner world when you see the bad actors on the world stage doing devious stuff. And what it's meant to be, or the uplifting element of this, or the harmonious element of this, is that you see what those bad actors are doing and you go, okay, how is my behavior in support of that or dependent on that? How can I change my behavior so that I'm not supportive of or dependent on that? Which is the only way that you actually affect change. You hear the old thing like, you want to change the world, change yourself. Well, that's true. And it works through this principle of the archetypes that, however that works, who knows, but that everything condenses down or is divisible through these principles of being, you know, whether it's I think the numbers 1 through 9 is actually a really fitting way to do it, or maybe 1 through 12. But again, we're opening up a can of worms here that's too big. But just to know that, like, you're never a victim to anything at all, period. You always have choice. The archetypes are not set in stone, things that just happen to us and expressed through us without our consent or our will, but that every action we take, every word we speak is a conversation between the imperial self, the I am, that is shared with all consciousness and all universe, and those archetype fragments that emanate from it. And so our conversation with the archetypes changes the way that they express themselves. We're telling them how we want them to be with everything we do, whether that's give me more of the light version of that archetype. I want some more of the shadow of that archetype. And it's not a static thing. It's a conversation and it's in continual flux. And your imperial self, is the nexus point that determines the flow of all those changes of the archetypes.
Nice. Great translation. Thank you. You guys make a good team.
I'm pretty sure that's what you meant, right, Gabe?
Totally, buddy. Totally. So is that Charlie? Did you say the guy with the corkboard meme? His name is Charlie?
I think it's
Is that
from a
right?
show Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Never
From The
watched the
Office?
show, but I'm pretty sure the character's Charlie.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, that's yeah, I love that image. I think it's interesting that what he's pointing at is chaos. He often has a cigarette and he looks like he hasn't slept. A personal corkboard, I find very beautiful. I find that what I'm doing is I'm making order out of the chaos. And that's what I like about my corkboard, is that it is not illogical. It's highly logical. It has great reason and purpose. And so, yeah, uh, I totally relate to Charlie, but in
Oh, we almost got all the words. Pretty close. Pretty close. We did not bad hearing you, Gabe, but it looks like it's dropped off. So any closing words, anything to share, any direction, things you got coming up, or directions you're heading in right now? Thanks everyone for joining.
I'll make some plugs here as we're winding down.
Please.
My channel is InnerVerse Podcast on YouTube or on any of the podcast player apps. You can find Gabe there with me frequently on at least a weekly basis most of the time. Also want to give thanks to Peter Shell for a really kind super chat on my channel where we're simulcasting this. Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Great supporter.
Very generous. That's awesome.
Appreciate you so much. A few things to be aware of coming down the pike. Actually, today we've published episode 6 of the Inner World podcast, which is with myself and Dylan Sicosio, who you've had on before. Really incredible, unique researcher. And we're in this new episode, we spent about 2.5 hours diving into the devil in the details, if you will, and describing the spirit world or linguistic, philological keys to understanding the mysteries perspective on what this devil character really represents in scripture and through astrotheology, honoring the work of the 1800s researcher, the Reverend Robert Taylor, who brought this stuff forward in a time where he had to go to jail to do it. And great stuff. It's a really good episode. There's 6 episodes of Inner World. It's for subscribers, supporters only through my Patreon or through my YouTube channel membership. I also offer biofield tunings, and those are extremely powerful for reconfiguring your belief structures and your psychic options to align more with the life that you want and the level of health that you have the potential for. It's really powerful stuff. I just sometimes, after a session, even though I've done hundreds of them, I'm just like, I can't believe I get to do this. I get to witness these transformations, that it works, and it works remotely. So if people are interested in that, they can email me, chance@innerversepodcast.com, or just go to my website, innerversepodcast.com. You'll see all kinds of content there. You'll see the ways to connect with me for tuning or other affiliates that I've got going on that are win-win situation for you to check out. InnerVersePodcast.com. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, sorry.
And thanks for having us on. This was a fun one.
Yes, my pleasure. Here, I'll get the URL. And if there's anything you want to say as well, that's all awesome stuff. Are you able to?
Yes, I would like to read a poem.
Okay, please do. That's the real URL, by the way. The other one I put in the chat is wrongy. Let's see if I can.
So this is a high.
You go ahead. Sorry.
So I highly recommend. Thank you. I highly recommend studying the art of the haiku. It makes you a better chat commenter. It allows you to reduce what you want to say to a very efficient degree. It is the secret to my success in the chat rooms. This poem has no title. Rooted limbs, bloom chi. Circuitous arms, melt snow, doubt, foe, and master.
Very nice, very tight, and very haiku. It's lovely. Yeah, conciseness, it goes a long way. It's great. I also love it. So it's been amazing to have you guys on. I've look forward to this for quite a while. Every time I see you guys together, I think, I gotta have that pair on because you have really amazing chemistry together. And thank you everyone for joining. It's nice that you restreamed. And yep, there's lots going on in my world as well. If you want to visit my website, there's a course that just started, but you could still jump on if you happen to be a nurturer that's looking for ways to not overgive and come up short every day and secretly hate the people that you help. So that doesn't work at all. And you want to be like Chance, a really happy helper. I feel exactly the same, that like, wow, I get to do this every day and be witness to people take enormous risks. It's like so amazing to be in the company of other people that are willing to dive in and see themselves in a new way and heal and let there should go. So I appreciate all of you guys. There's several channels if you want to. Oh, we lost Gabe, darn, but we're just about done. And yet Jay missed it, but you'll be able to watch the replay almost immediately. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. And Chance, I love you, and tell Gabe I love him as well.
Awesome. If people want to just hop over to my channel too, in 10 minutes, we're premiering the preview of that Inner World show. But thanks for hosting us.
Okay, fantastic. Good. You're starting right away.
We can come on anytime. We've got a lot of subjects that we've already researched and prepared and can tag team. So if you see anything that we discuss, you want us to bring it to your channel, we're always happy to. Thanks, Beth.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you as well. Bye, everyone.